Hey everyone, it's Marty and Jaden, and if you are a casual reader, well, good news is so are we. And if you're now getting into Brandon Sanderson, this is the definitive list for the casual reader of diving into the Cosmere with Brandon Sanderson.
Yep, we're not experts, but we love the books, and we know that you love the books, and we want to get as many people as we can into the books. And so we're going to give you the reading order that you should read through to get the most enjoyment out of these books. And
sometimes it's daunting. Sometimes you want to get into Brandon Sanderson, but you're like, he's written so many books. They're so long, some of them. How do I get into the Cosmere? How do I get excited about it without messing it up, reading the wrong book first, spoiling other books, or even just reading a book that's just too dry to start? Who knows?
And I will give you some solace that Sanderson is a brilliant writer, and
Yes.
he has written all of these books that you could just grab any series that you wanted and start from there and be okay and have a great time with those series. But we do have an order that we think that you could have the most fun with and quickly understand why Sanderson is so good at what he does.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive straight into it because you might be in line currently at Barnes & Noble and you need this answer quick. So what's the first book that we should go with?
So the list that I've got here, and I know you've got your own list too, so we can correct each other with these two, but we definitely think that you should start, well, I definitely think that you should start with the Mistborn series.
Yes, agreed.
Fantastic
Mistborn,
series.
Series 1. Yep.
Yes, fantastic series. It's a shorter set of books, shorter. Like if you're listening on the audio, it's like 20-something hours long, but it's not as long as A Way of Kings.
It moves faster. Like 50. The characters, the development, the plot all moves much faster in Mistborn. So it's a great one to start with. So that is The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages.
And fun fact, The Final Empire sounds like it should be the final book in a series. A lot of people get confused with this. It is the first book.
It's the first book. So if you want to start with Mistborn, you're starting with The Final Empire. So
may even be why I feel like in the most recent books he's rebranded it to be called just Mistborn, the first book. So,
that makes sense actually.
There are some other books though that we could recommend you starting with.
If you don't want to start with a 3-book series, especially like you mentioned, a little over 20 hours per book. If you want to start with a single book, you can wrap up just with one without a series to dive into the Cosmere. There are some other options for you.
Yeah, and the first of those options is Tress of the Emerald Sea. This is one of his most recent books from his secret projects, and the book is just a lot of fun. It's super creative, fast-paced, as in like it's only 400 pages, 300 pages, so you're not getting a whole series. You get a complete story from beginning to end. But you get to see Sanderson in action. He has an entire world that is just built beautifully, and he has an incredible story with it. It's just a lot of fun. You'll really enjoy it. The other book that you could start with is Warbreaker. This one I'm hesitant to recommend as your first Sanderson book, mainly because of the audiobook. If you're an audiobook reader only, then I don't feel like the guy who reads the book for Warbreaker is a very strong audiobook reader. But there are lots of people who just read this book without the audiobook, read the physical copy, who love this book and recommend it as the first book for people to start with. So also an option, but I recommended when Jaden first started these books, I tell them, start with Mistborn. You're gonna enjoy it.
And I'm glad that I did, but it was a little bit hard to get into it. Yeah. There are a lot of names, it's tricky, there's the whole world you gotta get introduced to, so you have 3 good options, right? If you want to start getting into the Cosmere with Brandon Sanderson, you can start with the Mistborn trilogy, you can start with Tress of the Emerald Sea, or you can start with Warbreaker. Choose your own adventure, whichever one you want to start with.
Yeah, and let me jump into what you said there too. Jaden actually had to start Mistborn like 3 times.
I did. That's true.
Yeah, and I kept on telling him like, dude, just get into it. Just get farther into it. Like it'll make sense. Like just trust the process. I promise you will not be disappointed. And once he got far enough into it, you kind of, something with Sanderson, if this is your first time, you have to accept that his style of writing is he's going to write a lot of terms and things going on that you're not going to understand. But his style is to not tell you what's going on, it's to show you.
Exactly.
And it's to like help you just experience the world, and you just get little pieces here and there.
It will unfold as you go along, but take that confidence going into the book. A lot of people have the same experience as you when they first start reading. So don't feel bad. If it's a little slow to start, trust the process. stick along for the ride. You'll like it.
Just think about how cool the magic systems are.
Exactly.
And it'll take you through. It'll take you through.
Absolutely. So once you've finished the Mistborn trilogy, where should you go?
I would say go from there to the Way of Kings books.
Okay.
Go there.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. The first Way of Kings book is called, or actually it's called the Stormlight Archive is the series. And the first book is called The Way of Kings. Fantastic book. A lot longer than Mistborn. I think it's about double the size. But again, a little bit slower start. But Sanderson, you will never be disappointed with the payoff. Incredible payoff in his books.
Absolutely. And if you want to have some fun while you're reading Way of Kings, we have a full series on our podcast. It's also here on the YouTube channel that you can follow along in, I think, 4 or 5 parts across the reading of Way of Kings. So that might be fun. If you want to take a look at that, go for it.
Read it with us. We'll discuss what's happened in the books, get our reaction.
It's fun.
It's a blast.
You'll have a good time. So one thing, though, before we move on to the next series or the next books, so it really depends on where you're at. So once you finish the Mistborn trilogy, right? If you are just hungry for more and you're ready to just dive deeper into everything that Brandon Sanderson does, Way of Kings, get it and just get off to the races. That sounds fantastic. If you're thinking, that was intense, I just committed to a trilogy, I'm like a little bit tired. Yeah, if you're a little bit tired with Mistborn, I would say before you go into Way of Kings, finish off those other 2 that we recommended. Tress of the Emerald Sea, Warbreaker. Take your time with those. Don't burn yourself out of Brandon Sanderson too fast.
Yeah.
Right? If you finish that Mistborn trilogy and you don't feel like you're just hungry for more, take your time and read the other 2 books before you get into Way of Kings.
Yep. I will say, though, the first Way of Kings book is good enough that I don't think you will get burnt out if you want to jump right in and everything. But I do think it's also a great suggestion that if you do feel like you need a break. Where I do think you might need a break is after Words of Radiance.
The second Stormlight Archive book.
The second Stormlight Archive book. And this is where I recommend to most people. So if you can, jump into his story called Edgedancer. It's a little bit more in depth on one of the characters.
Is that a novel or a short story?
It's a short story novel that I think he released it as a novel, as a novella.
100 or 200 pages?
Yeah,
shorter?
really, really short.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read that one.
Yeah.
Can't tell.
It's based off of, it happens right in the middle of the Words of Radiance, the story. The story takes place in the middle of Words of Radiance and goes on from there. But after Words of Radiance, so maybe read Edgedancer first, but the next one you should read after that is Secret History. This will jump you back into the Mistborn world a bit and give you some more information that will just really start opening up your mind to the whole Cosmere as a whole and how these books connect. And you'll start saying, okay, this is how things are going to connect. This is how the big picture that Sanderson's getting at. And that's why I love Secret History.
So Secret History right after Words of Radiance.
Secret History, Edgedancer, right after Words of Radiance.
Okay, got it.
Honestly, you could even do Secret History after Oathbringer if you wanted as well.
So by that point, you're only halfway through the Stormlight Archive, but you're taking a little bit of a break from those really, really long books to dive into a couple of short stories.
Yeah, you're finishing books 1 and 2 of Way of Kings or Stormlight Archive to jump into Secret History, Edgedancer.
Yes.
Or you could read Oathbringer as well, book 3. But once you get to book 3, that is when I recommend you take a step aside and definitely go into Secret History first.
Make sure you've read Secret History before
Make sure you read
Rhythm of
Secret
War.
History. You're going to start realizing how everything connects.
Yep. Okay.
After that, so this is where we haven't really talked about where you would go next with these books. I kind of want to hear what your thoughts on this. I've got my idea of it too, but...
So, having not read a lot of these books, and that's my disclaimer, Marty's read a lot more of these than I have. So he's telling me what I should be reading next. But I have read all of the Stormlight Archive. The next place that I want to go is, I'm trying to decide, so maybe you'll give me an answer. Either the secret projects, like Sunlit Man, I haven't read Tress, but more specifically like Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Do I go for those that are secret projects, or do I go straight into... Wax and Wane, which is Mistborn's second series?
You could start going into other books. You could go in the Sunlit Man. That is one I have not read yet.
Okay.
But I have heard that if you read Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, it's a short story in the Arcanum Unbounded.
Yes.
that one I've heard has some fun Easter eggs in there for Sunlit Man. So read there first.
So read Sunlit Man first?
Read Silence first.
Shadows for Silence. Okay.
Shadows for Silence first, then Sunlit Man.
Okay.
So if you want to go that direction.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Other books that Jaden kind of mentioned that are if you're having a whole meal, he mentioned this before.
They're snacks.
They're snack books.
Snack books.
Yeah. Would be a lot of the other books within Arcanum Unbounded. Sixth of the Dusk is one of them. The 11th Metal is another. One of the other secret projects books was Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Another great side story to go into. And
at what point? So Arcanum Unbounded holds a lot of these short stories inside of it. So at what point would you say a reader has full board to just go and read all of Arcanum Unbounded?
Not until you've gotten a little bit farther. And so
not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. So the specific ones you mentioned, they can read.
Yep.
But not more than that.
So I'll go through that again. So once you've finished Oathbringer and everything, I think this is a good time where you can go through Silence
Shadows for Silence.
Shadows for Silence, the 11th Metal, and Sixth of the Dusk. And also Secret History. We talked about that one just earlier. Mm-hmm. Other stories that you can jump into of Sanderson's that I think are great, that are pretty much a must after Oathbringer, are reading Elantris.
Okay.
Is great. And White Sand, which is another short story in Arcanum Unbounded. So White Sand must be read, and Elantris.
What about Dawn Shard?
The Dawn Shard is not a must, but it is an in-between story of Oathbringer and...
So you could also put Dawn Shard in this part as well if you want to.
Yes, 100, and that's where I would. I would fit Dawn Shard in there as well. It fits perfectly between Oathbringer and...
so as you're reading Way of Kings, you're kind of jumping a little bit around the Cosmere. And that hopefully helps refresh you as you're reading through what is a very long series.
Yep, very long series, but very good series. I don't mean to hang on the long part.
It's also not a series that completely ends. He hasn't written book 5 yet, as of the recording of this video. Yes. That's going to be released at Dragonsteel 2024. So
in December.
Don't feel like you have to rush through Way of Kings. You can take your time a little bit.
Yep. Next this is when I would jump into the Alloy of Law. This is Mistborn Era 2.
Wax and Wane.
Yes. And if you're confused here, I thought we just went through Mistborn, Sanderson has a grand scheme of how he's going to be doing things here.
It's a very Sanderson thing, you will realize.
Yes, very, very, very Sanderson-esque. He is planning on having 4 different eras of Mistborn. It's a world that is progressing through time, where it starts in the old days, where there's swords and castles and things like that, then jumps to, that's the first era of books, then it jumps forward several hundred years, and you've got guns and trains and things like that. Basically, Era 2 of Mistborn, definitely have to read Era 1 before you get to Era 2, but Era 2 is basically, I think it's a lot like a Batman and Sherlock Holmes mix. It is just awesome. They're a lot shorter of books, and they're a lot of fun. Not as deep, but more fun. Then Era 3 will be the 80s, pretty much. And then he'll jump into a space age for Era 4. And so that's where he's kind of going with that. But so anyways, you're going to go into Era 2 after all of those other books, which is the Alloy of Law and Shadows of Self and the Bands of Mourning, and then the Lost Metal. In there, you can also add Alamancer Jack, which is another short story in Arcanum Unbounded. Then finally, you'll get to The Rhythm of War, which is the most recent Way of Kings book.
Wait, hold on. Are you reading Rhythm of War after you read the second series of...
Yes.
That's important. So you're not done with... Still after Oathbringer.
Yep.
You're reading Wax and Wane, which is Mistborn Era 2.
You're pretty much reading everything before you get to...
Rhythm of War?
Rhythm of War.
Interesting. Okay.
And the reason
this
why...
This is good for me to know.
Yeah, this is good. You did read Rhythm of War already, and there's some of these books you haven't read, and which goes to show... You can read a full complete series without having read everything else.
Yeah, I'm still here. I still like Brandon Sanderson, and I did not read The Perfect Order. But because I didn't read The Perfect Order, I'm very interested in not only knowing what it should be, but also helping people that haven't started yet have the most seamless transition into the system.
Oh, yes. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing a reread before the last book.
Yeah.
We'll get into some of these books that Jaden hasn't read before all of those are reread, and then he'll understand once we get to Rhythm of War, like, oh, there are some things here that I completely went over my head.
I'm sure there are quite a few things, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, so there it is, Rhythm of War, very last after all those things.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I would say this as well is Sanderson at a recent event just said, he's like, okay, I am taking the gloves off. Like before, I've been kind of like hesitant at all of the connections between my worlds, and like when people kind of think that's weird. And he's like, you know what? These are my stories. I'm just going to go lean into it. And
that's awesome.
He said this after having released Rhythm of War, but I think he kind of started doing it here. And he really has some crazy connections in that book.
Which I probably missed because I didn't read the other ones first.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the one that he does this most in is in The Lost Metal, book 4 of the of the Era 2 of Mistborn. So, okay, I think we covered all the books. I want to go through the list one more time so you have a good,
let me ask
list.
about Arcanum Unbounded again.
Yep.
After you finish Rhythm of War, then you've basically read everything. You can read all of Arcanum Unbounded now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're good to read all of it. And I think I had listed all of Arcanum Unbounded already anyways.
Yeah, it's just kind of hard because especially for me when I was reading Arcanum Unbounded to skip around and not feel like, oh, I can't read that yet, but I want to read this and I can't read that. And especially in the audiobook, like you can't tell what's what.
No, it's a fair point. And what I would say is don't be afraid, because in the books, in Arcanum Unbounded, it'll tell you straight up. It'll say, do not read this before reading this specific book. And so,
okay.
Yeah,
that helps.
It helps a ton. And so you'll be warned.
So one book that we did not mention is Secret Project 2. And there's a reason we didn't mention it, right? And that is the Frugal Wizard's Guide, right?
Yes.
And the reason we didn't mention it is not specifically in the Cosmere.
Yeah, and it's not in the Cosmere at all, actually.
And this is a reading list just for the Cosmere. I know Brandon Sanderson has written a lot of books, a lot of things that aren't specifically taking place inside of this Cosmere universe, and those are not in this video. So right now we're just talking about, if you want to get into the Cosmere, kind of I would say the major system that he's building. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Anyway, that's the way to get into it. And this is probably the smoothest way to do so.
Yeah. Were there any other thoughts you had on that list, or you thought that should be different? I know you watched some other YouTubers' thoughts and people's thoughts.
I have seen people's thoughts, and I disagree with most people's thoughts. But I do think I do think you have this correct. One thing that I think I want to highlight in our list in particular is the fact that we give better options, right? Yep. Like you can read any of these after Oathbringer, but you don't have to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? You can say, well, I want to read Warbreaker first, and then I want to read Tress, and then I want to read Mistborn. That's fine. It's gonna do the same thing for you. But most of the other people that I've seen lists from are like, have to start with this, then you have to read this, then you have to read this. And I just feel like that makes it a little bit more of a chore. If you look at Tress and you're like, that looks like a sweet book, go ahead and read it. Like there's no reason not to. And this list that we are providing hopefully has enough choose your own adventure in it that you can pick the path that's right for you, whether that's, based on how long of a book you want to read at a certain period in time in your life, when you have more time, when you don't. Feel free to enjoy the Brandon Sanderson Cosmere at your own pace and ensure that you're having a good time, because that's what it's all about.
Oh, you gotta love it. So let me run through this one more time, just so you can get the close it out list. So first, definitely start with Mistborn. But this is where the choose your own adventure comes in, is you can do Tress first, or you can do Warbreaker. Those books can fit in anywhere you want. But you can go start with Mistborn, we'd recommend. Then you go into the Way of Kings. That starts with the first book, Way of Kings, second book, Way of Kings, and then I would say...
Second book, Words of Radiance.
Second book of the series, so Words of Radiance. And then read Edgedancer, one of that side story. Mm-hmm. Then go into Oathbringer, that is book 3 of the Stormlight archive of Way of Kings.
And then the floodgates open.
And you can start going into crazy stuff like secret history. Mm-hmm. That will blow your mind.
It's good.
It's really good. And then the 11th Metal is great. You can read about that too at the same time. Then after that, you can jump back into the...
And things like Six to the Dusk and all that stuff too.
Yeah, you can jump in. That's the other choose your adventure right at this point, right?
Yep.
You can do Shadows for Silence, The Sunlit Man, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, the Six to the Dusk. I'm actually going to change on Dawn's Shard. Oh. I'm going to say that you should read that right before the 4th book, so I'll get there in just a second.
Okay.
Elantris is another one you should read. Then read, if you're going to read Elantris, read The Hope of Elantris next after that. And then read The Emperor's Soul after that. That is also in the same world of Elantris.
Okay.
Once you're done with those books, you need to read White Sand. That is required reading before you read Book 4 of The Way of Kings. Then, also, before you read the Book 4 of Way of Kings, you just have to go through that second era of Mistborn, which is the Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, the Bands of Mourning, the Lost Metal. In that, you can sprinkle in the Allomancer Jack, which is also in the Arcanum Unbounded. Then, finally, you get to Dawnshard and Rhythm of War. It's a mouthful. I tried to make that as clean as possible.
I think that's a great list.
Yeah.
I think that's where you want to go. If you have a different list, or if you have a different opinion, if you've read some of the books and you have questions about why we put things in a certain order, please leave those in the comment section, because that's one of our favorite things. That's the reason we post these videos, so we can have cool conversations with other people that love Brandon Sanderson and his books.
And try to keep your comments as spoiler-free as possible when recommending these things. But I do understand if you have strong opinions, let us know about, like, say, hey, you should read this first. Wink, wink, nod, nod. This will influence your thoughts on another book.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
Give us the hints for sure. So if you like this video and it brought any value to you at all, please don't forget to like it. We really appreciate that, and it really helps the channel out. We definitely appreciate anyone who wants to subscribe to the channel and become a member of our group. I don't know what it's called, but join it. It's fun. And we post these videos about twice a week, so we're excited to see you then.